Welcome, friends of the true self. Thank you for being here with me today. And before we start, I want to invite you that for a moment you stop all thoughts. And what sounds really impossible or just unknown to you or strange in a way, is something that can open you to the you before thoughts. And so this small, unpretentious kind of gateway can open you back up. And so once again, just for a couple of seconds, stop all thoughts. Not much to it. And it seems as if it is sort of almost too small, too not big enough, like not like a 50-hour kind of practice, but it starts reframing your attention towards presence, towards the stillness. And it is a way how from this overcrowded mind and your identification with it, you start coming into connection with being. You start releasing yourself from the grip of the mind. And because it's such a trained way how we are, what we think we are, there's a collective amnesia of not knowing what we are. And it is really still a secret for many people how to transcend the mind, how to not be identified as this person. And even if you're spiritually or energetically inclined, if that is your path, then you will still come back always again and again to perceiving yourself as this person. But you can transcend this knowledge of yourself, because it's nothing else than really a knowledge of what you are. And you can experientially transcend it, that you know yourself to be consciousness, beingness, and not this person, and not these mind streams. And in the beginning, as a start, but also just to catapult you, and it can be enough for you actually, an instant, a moment of recognition of what exists prior to all these thoughts. So again, for just this 1 second, Stop the mind. And notice the presence that exists even when there are no thoughts. This presence is you. And this is your capacity and possibility to move your attention towards that and to come into touch with true stillness, not because you stop those thoughts, but because you come into touch with that stillness that is prior to these kind of thoughts. And in the beginning, it is about you simply doing this, trusting this, trying this out again and again and again, coming into touch again with pure beingness, presence. You want to come into contact with this level of yourself more and more because what it represents is contentment. This is a level of self that's not enmeshed with stories. And therefore it doesn't have any kind of causal suffering or causal form of emotion, causal form of reactivity, causal form of identification, causal form of recollection, causal form of anything actually, movement, mental movement. It is free of all of that. And it is about you basically starting to come into contact with this so that you can abide as being and that you become aware of this dimension of yourself that is simply still, is present, has no opinions, that is at peace. And depending how your life has been so far, you have a certain expectation what your threshold is of happiness. It is really like this. At some point, this personal construct has a threshold of perceived happiness. And so no matter what you actually do, and in what segment of your life you're trying to change this threshold that is an internalized construct. You will always come back to the same baseline, to the same threshold. And all the things, whether that is more success, more money, a different relationship, will always have a short kind of happiness that they give you, and then they eclipse, and you come back to the exact same baseline. And depending on where you are and what happened to you, these moments of happiness become shorter. For some people, they aren't there at all. There isn't much that makes them happy. And even those where the threshold is a bit higher up, all experiences will at some point stagnate or come back. That's where the seeking comes in for the next. And there is one way to change this threshold again, no matter what has happened to you, independent of your stories, independent of what this life has been for you, independent of what the horrible stories are that exist in your mind, or what life brought to you, or what your perceived reality is like, or all of it. Independent of this, you can change this baseline. And the only way to change it is obviously then no longer in all of these objects, but in you becoming aware of awareness. Awareness, what you are, consciousness, is your gateway to peace, is your gateway to a contentment that you don't even know exists prior to coming into touch with it, prior to coming into touch with awareness itself, to this space of self that has no story, that is detached from all these kind of ideas of self. And that's when the contentment really comes into your life. And a gratitude, even then in a different form of enjoyment of objects, bigger gratitude for what is then bestowed upon you in your life. Gratitude for small objects, for food, or for a sunny day, or for something that is, or for a chair, for objects that are usually just mundane objects. But there's just this primary sense of well-being, this primary sense of contentment that comes into your life, and that's not leaving you then. To the opposite, it actually strengthens itself. There's a silence that envelops then all of experience. You are this silence, you are this stillness, you are this unmoving presence that is content, content in itself. no more lacking, isn't lacking anything. And so it is this contentment that then simply expands on itself. And so that's why it's so relevant for each person to come into the knowledge of the true self, to come into the knowing of yourself as awareness, to come into a direct experience of awareness, not just a mental one. You have to start coming into direct experience of awareness so that this dimension is what you know yourself to be. And this contentment can start infusing your life, becoming your anchor. And the Yoga Sutra that I'm talking about in a way already is the Yoga Sutra in which he talks about Duhkha, suffering. Dukkha means literally in Sanskrit a constricted, contracted space. It is that in this sutta he talks about what are the manifestations sahabhuvaha of chitta vikshepa, that means of an identified mind, a wandering mind. Vikshepa is wandering towards objects. It is when you become enmeshed or identified with a mind stream. It is that your mind or your awareness goes into something to have an experience. But the signs of this identified mind that only knows itself as this person, as this body, as this mental frame, as your character, as your personality, as your soul. All of them name, all of them are a limitation. All of them are an identification. And what happens then is dukkha. That is a contracted space. And how contracted this space is this kind of threshold. And a person is so identified with this dukkha threshold that they might not even know. They might not even know how contracted they actually are. What is it that the mind, the awareness might not be there, that they know what happens actually in their mind? What are the kind of stories that they tell themselves every day? What is your level of possibility? What kind of do you still believe in possibility? And even energetically, where if you are very, very open to energetics, contraction of your heart space, but also when you are in dukkha, when you are in suffering, it's actually one of the ways to already become more aware is to find your suffering, your story as an energetic imprint, is a way how to detach. And at some point, you can actually also have an energetic kind of sensing of thoughts. It's literally not just a contraction of your heart space, but it is as if there is something grasping your head. And thoughts also, when you are very, very strongly in thoughts, you can at some point see their quality, feel, sense their quality, almost like these amplitudes you can see. It's a way how to detach from thoughts, from these mind streams. So he says, an identified mind, what are the manifestations of it? What are the manifestations of suffering? Dukkha, contraction. Form of contraction is felt or is present. And then the second one, super important, a negative mindset. It is to land back again and again to a need for negativity, need to see a world that's negative, and need to see yourself as negative. Any as the most positive things can happen to you, and you will still see negative, believe negative. It is a negative mindset. And then the third kind of manifestation that this kind of identification can lead you into is problems or trembling of the body, like really also contractions in the body. All these are also ways how you can detect it. Always remember, awareness, what you are, can also help you detect all these mechanisms, detect these kind of identities, detect what prevents you from transcending them. The third one are tremblings or contractions in your body. Everything that also then became tensed up, tensions in the mind, tensions in your spaciousness, in your own, like contracting your presence, contracting your mind into a negative mindset, contracting the body, contractions, tensions, these kind of feelings that keep you identified also with the body. And then the last one is what happens to us when we suffer is also like a really disturbed kind of breath. And so already also again helps you to get an awareness of these disruptive breathing patterns, and also to help release them. Start placing attention on the breath can also release you from certain storylines, certain ideas that have ingested themselves. And all the following sutras are about overcoming these kind of manifestations. Obviously, by ultimately always again by knowing yourself, changing the threshold. How do you change it? By knowing you are in this person. And then something else comes in that has no threshold, nor does it have an idea of self, nor does it have needs or wants. It is perfected, coming into touch with the part of yourself that is perfected. The person is never perfected. Person is a construct, but you are perfected already on that level. And what's more important, you are content. And so the more you come into contact with this, the more this is always present for you. Contentment that doesn't leave. A peace that doesn't leave. An expansion that is revealing itself and coming into your life on its own accord. No more doing things for it. No more doing things for the peace. Just a remembrance of what you are. And so this is a really, really relevant sutra that is also showing what yoga was about. It was about overcoming dukkha. It was about leading you to happiness, ultimately, contentment, the opposite of contraction. What's the opposite of contraction? What is the self? Ever expansive. An expansion that's not anymore caused by the person, but the expansive essence of yourself. Allow the stillness of self into your life. Namaste.